Welcome to the Beyond Jiu Jitsu podcast, episode number 10. We're finally in the double digits.
Double digits.
That sounded terrible. My name is Kieren. I'm a white belt under Adam Childs, and I'm also a Jiu Jitsu media producer with my company Ground 9 Productions, along with my business partner Zach, who will be featured on this podcast, I should say, soon in an upcoming episode.
Not this episode. We don't like him enough to put him this early.
No. He's going to be one of the later, ring-ins. We'll say lastminute.com.
Yeah, when we've run out of interesting characters.
Exactly. Then we'll bring Zach on. I hope he listens to this episode. I really do. And I'm here with my co-host.
Adam Childs, a black belt under Alliance head coach Fabi Gurgel, owner of Alliance Sydney Jiu Jitsu with my wife. And, Kieren's coach sometimes when I feel like it.
Yeah, when I'm being a good boy.
Whenever he turns up. No, Kieren trains a lot.
So today we are talking about media.
Yeah, obviously specifically jiu-jitsu media. I think by default talking about jiu-jitsu media is going to mean we're talking essentially about Flo Grappling, really. We'll go into the pros and cons of that. But it's actually, it's quite interesting because I've only just thought about it now. I didn't think about it beforehand. But, obviously, whenever we talk about anything jiu-jitsu related on the podcast, which is most of what we talk about, it's always an interesting take because you and I are at two completely different ends of the spectrum. At the moment you're a white belt, you won't be forever, right? But at the moment it's like a white belt and a black belt. Not only are we different belts, but you're just under 12 months of training. I've been training for over a decade, so media, for example, not only is it in your wheelhouse due to the fact that you have a YouTube channel, you run a production company with your business partner and, so it's already what you're knowledgeable about. But it's interesting as well because jiu-jitsu media already existed before you started training jiu-jitsu, whereas it didn't for me, right? Like when I started, we had the internet, but even when I started, social media wasn't big. Like Instagram didn't exist, Twitter didn't exist, definitely TikTok didn't exist. Like none of those platforms existed. Even YouTube still wasn't anything near what it is today. So it's interesting because thinking back when I was a white belt, jiu-jitsu media didn't exist. Like if you wanted an instructional, for example, you bought a book, you would have you could buy books on, written by whoever, like Hicks and Gracie or whatever.
Yeah, and they had images featuring the different movements.
Yeah.
There is a guy, very skilled judo practitioner that trains at our gym. And he was actually the first person to show me a martial arts style instructional book because he has one on judo. And I found that really interesting. So
looking back, looking back, I'm just now it's all just going through my head. That's how a lot of martial arts were taught. There used to be a magazine in Australia called Blitz magazine. Have you ever heard of that?
Never.
Yeah, I don't even know if it exists anymore. I think it was an Australasian martial arts magazine. I didn't read it, so I don't, I didn't read it as in wasn't something I was subscribed to or whatever. So they may well have had jiu-jitsu articles in there, but it was more from my understanding, it had karate and taekwondo and, kung fu and more that sort of stuff. But just thinking back, man, old karate books where you would learn the moves or old Bruce Lee books and stuff. Whereas, and you had that for jiu-jitsu too, not like it is nowadays. And, you have no exposure to pre-jiu-jitsu media.
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of all you've known. Whereas, it didn't exist when I started and now it's very prevalent.
Okay, here's one for you to kick it off. Do you think that the popularity of jiu-jitsu has caused a rise in media, or do you think the rise in media in jiu-jitsu has caused a rise in popularity? What came first, the chicken or the egg? Or do you think they're just one in the same?
Yeah, I think they just feed off each other, right? I don't know which came first. Like they feed off each other alongside just with the growth of, you know, for lack of a better word, the internet in general, just the growth of the internet and, you know, sharing information and social media and Instagram and all that, like, you know, all of those things have grown together. I don't think you could necessarily say one came first. I don't think it's like jiu-jitsu is popular enough now that we can create an online platform, you know, or that like, oh, let's just, you know, even though jiu-jitsu is a sport no one cares about, let's make Flo Grappling and then all of a sudden jiu-jitsu is popular. No, right? Like, I think it happened side by side.
Yeah, I have to agree with that sentiment. Totally agree. So when it comes to media, jiu-jitsu specific media, there are a couple of big players, but obviously the elephant in the room, and we've already mentioned them a few times, is Flo Grappling. Yep. Now, Flo Grappling, if you don't know what Flo Grappling is and you're listening to a jiu-jitsu podcast, I'm shocked, first of all. Whip out your phone and just do a Google search of Flo Grappling, or even just type jiu-jitsu into YouTube, and Flo Grappling will own probably the top 15 out of the top 20 search results there on YouTube. So Flo Grappling is everywhere. Flo Grappling produced the now infamous Daisy Fresh series. They produce all of the ADCC media content. They own exclusive rights to ADCC. They have their own championship now, Who's Number One, which you may or may not have seen, but that's where all the in vogue athletes are competing nowadays. It's an attempt at sort of a UFC Fight Pass style jiu-jitsu
sort of
event.
thing.
Yeah, and that's growing in popularity, but we're going to definitely see more of that. And at some point during this episode, I'm going to talk about my predictions for the future for Flo Grappling and media in general. But Flo Grappling isn't well received by everyone. Now, if you're in the limelight...
I don't know anyone who doesn't like Flo Grappling.
Who doesn't like them? Exactly. Flo Grappling did not pay me to say this.
Yes, someone like sitting across with a knife.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, it's no surprise that if you've been around jiu-jitsu long enough, or, you know, someone that tells you that not everyone likes Flo Grappling.
Well, yeah, I like. It's funny you say that because I don't like Flo Grappling at all. I think I only have one nice thing to say about Flo Grappling, but I don't know. Have you met other people who aren't on board with Flo Grappling? Like you being more in that sort of media platform, you know more people in that industry.
So the biggest criticism that I hear and I have on Flo Grappling is the way they handle how they own exclusive rights to media coverage for the big jiu-jitsu events. Yeah. In today's, you know, modern climate, one of the biggest events, if not the biggest, I'd probably go out on a limb and say the biggest jiu-jitsu event is ADCC.
Yeah,
and
definitely the most prestigious.
It's the most prestigious. It's the most popular. It's the most streamed, I believe. Now I'm pulling this out of my ass, but I'd bet on it. That if we looked up the streaming numbers for jiu-jitsu events, it would be at the top. And Flo Grappling works in tandem with ADCC, and they own the media rights, exclusive media rights for all ADCC coverage. And they own exclusive media rights to a whole bunch of other events, like, well, their own event, obviously, Who's Number One, Fight to Win as well, and a couple of others that they have had these jiu-jitsu events, competitions sign over media rights. Now, the biggest criticism that I have and that I see when it comes to that is the way they handle that. An anecdotal story of backing up what I'm saying, and you know, we don't have a fact checker on the show. However, I've heard that it's to the point where Flo Grappling will pull any content put out there by athletes themselves that competed in an ADCC sanctioned event because Flo Grappling owns the rights.
Oh, I haven't heard that.
They won't even let the athletes publish
so
their
savage,
own
man. Like
content. Yeah.
I know that, for example, do you know the channel or the Instagram or whatever, BJJ Scout?
Yes.
It's a rather anonymous channel that does breakdowns of fights or techniques or fighters' special, their position of expertise or whatever. It has no person, like there's no face to the name BJJ Scout. It's just music and text and some little animations over the fighters to show like, oh, look, his hands here, hands there, whatever, right? And it existed before Flo Grappling, but now like Flo Grappling have essentially shut them down, right? Like, I mean,
because they pull all of their content for copyright.
Yeah, exactly. And look, before we continue, I said a minute ago, I only really have one nice thing to say about Flo, and
so you're going to lead with it?
I'm going to lead with it because then I don't have anything positive to say after that, okay. Really. Is that, like, it's great that Flo exists because it's helping the growth of jiu-jitsu. I'm all on board for that, right? I'm on board with jiu-jitsu gaining more exposure, becoming more popular. The more people do it, the better for everyone. The more athletes can make a living out of jiu-jitsu. It's quite well known that there's not a lot of money in the competitive scene in jiu-jitsu, and it's very slowly changing. But, if you went back 10 years, like there was zero money. At least now there's, some super fights and events that offer prize money and whatever. And so I'm all for that. But essentially what you said, the fundamental problem that really frustrates me with Flo is that they have exclusive rights to pretty much everything in jiu-jitsu, right? Yet they're not unbiased kind of news reporting media channel for jiu-jitsu.
No, absolutely not.
Like they're in the entertainment industry, and that's fine, but then when you're in the entertainment industry and you own everything and then you choose like what's featured, what's not featured, like, man, it's just this completely biased view of the sport, right? Like there's plenty of, like if you're not chowing down on some Flo Grappling chode, right? Like you're essentially then a nobody, and they can make or break you. And I mean, I don't, if they were just a media promotional like let's imagine Flo were exactly who they are today, but they didn't have exclusive rights to everything. They were just this booming, essentially marketing jiu-jitsu propaganda machine, right? To some extent, you couldn't fault them. Like, I mean, yeah, maybe they do dodgy stuff in business or whatever, but who cares, right? I'm just saying, if that was their angle, they were just this entertainment marketing machine and they could make or break athletes, like that would kind of be fine because they're just good at their job. But the fact that that's who they are and they own everything, like there's zero room for anyone else. It's almost like, how in the US they've got the two news channels, like that one's left and one's right. I think it's like Fox CNN and CNN, Fox, right? Yep. Imagine if the US, like they only showed one of those channels. Like, it was only Fox News, for example, and they only showed Fox News and, things that pushed forward the Fox News opinion and whatever, and there was no even access to the other side of the story. Like, that's kind of how I see Flo Grappling. They just own everything, right? And there's zero room for anyone else. They own everything and are completely biased in what they put forward. So if you're not willing to bend over for them, man, like where do you go?
And I think this definitely highlights the difference between, for a lack of a better term, your generation and my generation, like the new white belts coming up. I don't know anything different, right?
Because it didn't,
it didn't exist.
Well, I mean,
in your time.
Yeah, like Flo Grappling already existed before you started.
Yeah, exactly. So when I think you mentioned this, you highlighted it in a previous episode, but it's worth going over, is when I mentioned the biggest names that I knew, they were exclusively Danaher Death Squad or thereabouts, or people featured on Flo Grappling. Yeah. I didn't know anyone that, is a big name in the IBJJF scene, like Isaac, that you were talking about last.
Zaki Bayance,
Yeah, that you were talking about last episode. And the guy's a machine. Like the guy is one of the best jiu-jitsu competitors in his weight division in the world.
Yeah.
But no one knows his name. And when I mean no one, I mean like I'm talking Gen Pop, new people from the States, etc., who know most of their competitors from Flo Grappling. Another thing that I think highlights the power of Flo Grappling is another thing that you mentioned in a previous episode is the whole Daisy Fresh scene.
Oh my God.
Like if you're not on Daisy Fresh, say for like you gave the analogy, if you took someone that is featured on Daisy Fresh and they had a seminar right next door to someone like Isaac or another big name, that could potentially have been a previous world champion.
I don't know, like even someone maybe bigger than Isaac, like Lucas Lepri or, Bushesha or Merigali.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe with the exception of like someone like Bushesha, or even still, if you compare the two, like a purple belt from Daisy Fresh, who's well known, or a blue belt or what have you, a seminar next door to a black belt world champion, which one would fill up first? Well,
the Daisy Fresh one.
There you go.
Even though it's just some nobody purple belt.
Because they're not a nobody anymore, Adam.
Right.
Like they are they're a Daisy Fresh purple belt. It's changing the landscape.
That's what I hate, man. Like I just said, if Flo Grappling was just this marketing machine and they made or broke athletes, that would be all well and good, like you couldn't really fault them, and anyone who complained about it, you'd just kind of say, well, man, you got to get better at marketing or whatever. But because Flo own everything, like where does an athlete like Zaki Bayance, Merigali, or any up and coming blue or purple belt who's not at Daisy Fresh, and they want to burst onto the scene, but they have zero connections to Flo Grappling, like where do you go? Right? Like you can't, like you could even go and win a big competition, but like, if Flo Grappling don't choose to feature that, like you're screwed.
Yeah.
And it man, like really pisses me off.
The same problem could be said in so many other sports. Let's go to a similar sport that that our listeners can probably relate to and that we could probably relate to is MMA, specifically UFC. Flo Grappling arguably is the UFC of jiu-jitsu right now, or they're heading in that direction. They're trying to be the UFC of jiu-jitsu. In the UFC, you could be the best fighter, but you won't get paid the most unless you put bums on seats. Look at Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
He is probably the highest paid UFC athlete of all time.
And he's one of the worst human beings.
And
I don't want to say one of the, there's plenty of bad people.
He's got an act, right? We could talk about his demeanor backstage versus, online and everything like that. He's got an act, but he's not even the best on record, right? He doesn't have the best record. And basically what it comes down to is just because you are a very promising athlete, you could be very good, but if you don't finish in a spectacular fashion, if you have quote unquote boring fights, but even though you're winning, or you don't have a big personality to attract money, attract viewership, to attract bums on seats, you're not going to be paid appropriately. Like you're not going to be paid proportionally to your skill. Right? And the same can be said in jiu-jitsu. The same thing is happening in jiu-jitsu because at the end of the day, this is the entertainment game over being the jiu-jitsu game, or being, as they say in MMA, the fight game, right? And that is what Flo Grappling is, because the model, it works. It generates income. It generates awareness for the sport. But what you see is people that are on different circuits, people that are competing in IBJJF, they're not getting any attention.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what like you could argue that they're not getting any attention because IBJJF competitions aren't as entertaining. You could make that argument, but on the counter argument I would say is that, well, there's not even the opportunity for someone to cover it and make it entertaining anyway, because Flo own it and then just choose not to air it, right? Like, even look at there was what was on quite a while ago by the time people are listening to this episode, but BJJ Bet or whatever, there was an event that was just on this previous weekend. Leandro Lowe, fought Hulk, and Merigali was on there. There was quite a few fights. And yeah, Flo covered it, but they didn't cover it and amp it up the way they do for anything that involves the Death Squad or anything.
Who's number one, their
or
own
who's
stuff.
number one.
Yeah, they're doing the exact same thing with Fight to Win. So that's actually a good segue. For those that don't know, Flo Grappling signed contract deals for media coverage with Fight to Win. It's a similar championship style, special event, super fight style event. And there is actually a big falling out between the owner of Fight to Win and some of the owners of Flo Grappling because of exactly what you're saying. Like Flo Grappling are adhering to their contractual obligations, but no more, no less. Yeah. They are meeting, their requirements on the line. They're not marketing it like they do their own events of who's number one. Even though Fight to Win, I believe, came first and who's number one is quite new. But from Flo Grappling's perspective, they're a business. They're in it to make money. Why would they support their competitors like this BJJ Bet and Fight to Win when they can pump their own stuff and take a monopoly, which is effectively what they're doing.
That's exactly what they're doing. They're a monopoly. And it is the entertainment industry. I don't have a problem with that. The root of the problem is that they have the rights to everything.
Because they're paid for them, you know.
So they have the rights to everything, and then they're a monopoly. So
who's to blame? Not like we're we're not privy enough to start pointing blame games, but to be honest, it's the people that are running these events like Fight to Win, or people that are running the big events. Like IBJJF. I don't actually think Flo Grappling owns the rights for IBJJF.
I think they used to, but I'm not sure if they do anymore.
We'll have to fact check
because they used to cover a lot of it, and then recently IBJJF have been making a bit more effort on their own Instagram. So I'm not 100% sure, but definitely like Flo covers it to some extent. Maybe that's changed with the explosion of their own stuff.
Yeah,
but
I don't think they have exclusive rights to all. Like to have exclusive rights to IBJJF, like internationally, would be incredibly difficult and incredibly expensive because you have small events like IBJJF affiliated events here in New South Wales in Sydney, or one in state events here and there.
Those ones are different, like those AFBJJ events and stuff.
They're like affiliate?
No, they just like follow the IBJJF rules. Like they really have nothing to do with it. For example, as an athlete, you don't need an IBJJF membership to compete in those.
But you need a BJJF,
different, completely different thing. But ignoring COVID, there are IBJJF competitions in Australia, like the Pan Pacs and the Sydney Open and stuff.
Got it.
But I'm not exactly sure their relationship with IBJJF, but I mean, when I last saw Flo was at like the Masters Worlds in Vegas in 2018.
That's when you competed at Worlds?
Yes. No, 2019 was when I competed. 2018 was when like I was speaking to some of the guys at Flo.
Right.
And it's when I got my black belt. It's when Roberto Jimenez got his brown belt when he was still with Alliance. Anyway, Flo was there covering all of that. So I'm not sure what has changed in the relationship since then to now. Obviously, from then to now, the world has changed globally.
Yeah. And,
events were cancelled and things. So whether that made certain contracts null and void, I don't really know, right? But, the crux of the problem is having a marketing company own everything.
Yeah. Well, distribution is power. When it comes to like media, everyone is a marketer. Everyone, and this is a quote from Gary Vee for anyone who's familiar with our Lord and Savior, Gary Vee.
The hell is Gary Vee?
Oh, I will educate you. Don't worry. So you're a marketer before you're anything. You're a media company before you're anything in today's day and age, right? And this really highlights the juxtaposition that you were alluding to before when you first started training jiu-jitsu versus when I first started. When I first started, I very much media dominated the sport. It just did. Video dominates the landscape of jiu-jitsu. And that is exemplified by Flo Grappling, by Daisy Fresh, by ADCC, all of these events. Like if you're not a part of that system, then no one knows who you are, regardless of if you're good or not. because you don't have exposure, right? So
And like, man, oh, fuck, this really pissed me off, bro. Like I watched the Daisy Fresh episodes. I thought they were awesome. They were super entertaining.
Yeah.
Like they
very well produced.
Yeah,
like
really well
incredibly
made,
high
really
quality.
well produced, really funny, really good jiu-jitsu, really
Good
interesting
storytelling.
characters. Like they were great. Like, you know, so, you know, at the start when I said I only have one nice thing to say about Flo, I mean, that's not true. Like the Daisy Fresh episodes are awesome. But again, like they're not awesome because they're made by the company that like dictates who is relevant in jiu-jitsu, right? Like if you look at a lot of the who's number one like fighters on the cards, there was a particular event that was it was like 80% of the athletes were from Daisy Fresh, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, man, like I'm happy for them, but at the same time, I'm gutted for the athletes who are trying to make it, but they don't have connections with Flo Grappling. So, you know, it's just that,
and if
it's
they go
almost
through-
like going back to, it's almost that expression. It's not what you know, it's who you know.
Oh, 100%.
And it's like becoming, and it's relevant now to jiu-jitsu, which it shouldn't. I mean,
the pushback would be if they go through an IBJJF sanctioned event and they win it, then surely they would come into the spotlight through that way. Then they'd get noticed. But we're not really seeing that. I've already highlighted examples of competitors that as a beginner I look up to as, oh my God, this is what I want to be one day, you know, and they're not featured. I've never seen these athletes featured. Like honestly, half the time when you're naming relevant, even in today's, you know, today's jiu-jitsu relevant athletes that are at the world championship level, I have no idea who you're talking about. But as soon as you mention someone on Daisy Fresh, or as soon as you mention, you know, anyone from the Danaher Death Squad or anything that is featured on Flo Grappling, I know exactly who you're talking about.
There's essentially like there's really just three main, you know, relevant teams / competitive groups at the moment in jiu-jitsu, which are the Danaher Death Squad. I mean, they split up or whatever, but anyway, the Death Squad.
That group of athletes.
Yeah. Daisy Fresh and Atos because of the fact that
they have conflict with.
Exactly. You know, those three groups, like, and why are those three groups the famous three groups? Because of Flo Grappling, right? Like these other very high level teams, competitors, like no one knows who they are.
And now when we say no one knows, I know that there's going to be people that are jumping up and down and want to leap through their bloody headphones and throttle us. But like, but what about Keenan? What about this guy? What about that guy? Like everyone loves him. They have 100,000 followers or whatever. And we're not, when we say no one knows who they are, we don't mean like no one in jiu-jitsu. Like obviously people that follow the sport competitively are going to know the big athletes in IBJJF. What we're saying is people that are new to the sport, like lower belts like myself, even, you know, like white belts, blue belts that have only been training for a few years, and maybe they're in an environment where they're not told about anyone else, so they don't know. So when we say no one, we're talking about, you know, broad brush, the full spectrum of jiu-jitsu. Now, do we expect everyone that has ever trained jiu-jitsu to know the name, you know, Gordon Ryan or whatever? No, but it's different, right?
You know what it reminds me of is like, you know, the fact now that there's so much more than what Flo Grappling chooses to show, right, in the jiu-jitsu world, that it kind of reminds me of when I was a white belt and I thought the only thing I knew about jiu-jitsu was the Gracie name. And it kind of makes me think the way that, you know, a lot of people now look at how the Gracies try to think they own everything and, you know, that all jiu-jitsu is Gracie jiu-jitsu and blah, 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 blah. It reminds me when I was a white belt and looking to move to Brazil and pursue jiu-jitsu.
Looking for Gracie.
Yeah, like I just looked for Gracie gyms, and luckily for me, I had a training partner at the time who was like, man, you know, like it's not just Gracie, it's just a name. Like you've got all these other teams like that exist, like you've got Novo União, you've got, you know, he's like, check out these guys, the Mendes brothers, check out like Andre Galvao, check out Alliance, check out like all these other, you know, teams. And like, I didn't know, I thought it was just Gracie. And it's kind of like new white belts now, they think like it's just whatever Flo Grappling show. And it's like, no, man, there's like so much more. There's so many other options, right?
Yeah. So what's the, like, what's the not solution, because it sounds like there's a big problem. I mean, I don't really see Flo Grappling as a problem to jiu-jitsu. Yeah, they have a monopoly. I think that all in all, if you strip away everything and look at it objectively, Flo Grappling does more good for the sport than they do negative. And I'll stand by that.
Yeah, I would agree too. But like,
you don't have to agree. We can fight.
No, like, yeah, I guess I said it at the start, right? I'm all for the growth of the sport and they do that really well. But I'm trying to think of an example in any business. Can you, competition is good in business.
Yes.
Right?
Oh,
so can you think
agree.
of any business that it's good that one particular company has a monopoly on the market?
Amazon.
and everyone loves Amazon, and
Yes.
the fact that Jeff Bezos pays zero taxes, everyone loves him.
They treat their employees very well. Yeah.
Right, like show me an industry where one particular company has a monopoly and people go, it's good for the business that one company has the monopoly.
Honestly, I can't. And
It's just terrible. So you can
Yeah.
love Flo Grappling as much as you want, right? I don't. But you could be, as someone listening could be like, man, what are you talking about? Flo Grappling's the best.
I know a lot of people like that. I know
Right?
a lot of people that absolutely love Flo Grappling, love what they do, subscribe to their platform. Like I have access to their platform. Like not trying to sound like a hypocrite here, but I've watched a lot of their content. You mentioned you really enjoyed their content because they're producing the best entertainment for jiu-jitsu in the world right now. That's like a...
But it's just not good for the sport as a whole that they haven't a monopoly. The only time it would be fine is if it was a completely unbiased, just like news coverage of the sport. If they had nothing to do with like the actually like the entertainment factor, nothing to do with like putting on events or whatever. Like think something like, I don't know, like Formula One. Like it's just, it's like the one company that has the rights to. So for example, in Formula One, when you have different commentators from different countries speaking different languages commenting on the race, all of those guys around the world are all getting fed the same feed, right? The same video footage.
Yeah.
That they're all. So it's like the one company. It changes sometimes from country to country due to legality reasons and different partnerships in different countries, but it's not like they're pushing an agenda, right? They're just very impartially putting forward the event, the race, right?
They have the video feed, they have the video.
Yeah.
So they're in charge, they're getting paid to have the cameras on the track and film the event.
So a monopoly like that would be fine. If Flo Grappling, if all they did was like film pre-fight interviews, the fights and post-fight interviews, whatever.
So the pure production.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, that's not. They've got a monopoly on everything else. And like I just said, you can love them as much as you want. That's all good. But like, you can't sit here and tell me, like I asked you the question, find me an industry where one company having a monopoly on the market is good the market.
Yeah.
Like I honestly can't think of any.
I think something that would be fantastic to happen would be for a competitor of Flo Grappling to rise.
That's in my opinion what needs to happen.
Well,
and
look at Bellator versus UFC. Like Bellator has forced UFC to evolve and to quote unquote step up their game, and even ONE FC because they're taking viewership. And ONE FC and Bellator are fantastic organizations, and they have very, very high level competitors. But the UFC is still on top, and they're continually evolving. If we had a company,
but it's because of that competition,
Exactly,
right? Yeah,
exactly.
So I don't mind if Flo stays the dominant company in the market, right? But they need to be better.
So in your opinion, what okay, so if tomorrow you took over as CEO of Flo Grappling. Now, I'm not expecting a full business plan in a jiu-jitsu.
Well, it's just so happened you asked.
No, I'm not expecting a full thought out, 12-page document that you're going to recite, but what would you implement, or to phrase it differently, what would you like to see out of Flo Grappling that's realistic for them to in your view be rightfully at the top spot, or to handle their monopoly a bit better, or what have you? What would you like to see happen for change to be positive?
I think they need to choose a lane And if they want their lane to be like the entertainment marketing in like lane, then just choose that lane and stick to it, you know, opposed to where their current position is that they just own everything and cherry pick what they want. Like, I'm not sure the legalities of what's happening on the back end, but of course, if another company tried to rise up and challenge Flo, like
They would need to put on their own event.
they would probably need to put on their own events and stuff. And of course, Flo would do everything in their power to squash them, right? The same way you can't, you know, if you launched a clothing line or whatever, you would get to a certain point where you're gaining enough traction that companies like Nike, Lululemon, all these big companies would try and squash you. That's just business, right? That's big business, I should say. So, you know, that's like what they did to BJJ Scout, right? You know, like I can't believe you said that they pull the footage of their own individual, like of fighters posting.
On ADCC, yeah.
You know,
It's definitely happened. It's definitely happened in the past. I'm not sure if it's still happening, but that was one of the big reasons why some competitors are a bit sour at Flo Grappling is because, because they own exclusive media rights. Anything that comes from these big events, particularly ADCC, has to be, you know, sanctioned by Flo. It has to be signed off by Flo. So you can't film your own fight.
Yeah, it just rubs me the wrong way, eh? Like, you know, I don't know if they had an event where you just got money for showing up. Yeah, for sure. Anyone from those three teams I mentioned would get paid more than, you know, some other person who's more respectable.
But I mean, the pushback would be, like, from a business point of view, if I own Flo Grappling and I'm listening to this podcast and I hear two guys, you know, criticizing the fact that, you know, a media company owns exclusive media rights to an event, I would say, well, we as a company, we, you know, established ourselves over years. We worked very hard and we bought that. We paid a lot of money for those exclusive media rights, and for it to be profitable for our company and for it to be beneficial to jiu-jitsu as a whole, for us to be profitable, then we need to own the exclusive rights and utilize them to the utmost of, you know, our power. You know what I mean? Well, basically what I'm trying to say is Flo Grappling probably has paid a shitload of money to the ADCC to own those rights, and they've probably paid a shitload of money to put on these Who's Number One events. But at the same time, because there's no one doing what Flo Grappling is doing at that level or at that scale, there's just no competitor. Like, Flo Grappling has competitors, but like for Jits Magazine or BJJ Scout or all of these other magazines that are reporting news, or even Jiu-Jitsu Times, you know, that are news outlets, they're reporting on news, but it's not the same. It's not like a media distribution empire, and there's no one producing that media at the level of Flo Grappling, even close to compete.
Yeah. So I mean,
that's the problem.
Yeah, there needs to be a competitor in the market. And, you know, again, like, I don't know all the legalities. It's not like I'm a lawyer, nor have I sat and spoke to someone about all Flo Grappling's contracts and whatever. So for all I know, right, it could just be the case that there's no one with enough money behind themselves to compete with Flo.
I think that's
for all
what
I
it
know,
is.
the door is wide open and there's just no one doing it, right? But there needs to be some competition to Flo Grappling. Again, I don't mind if Flo stay as the dominant, best, you know, company in the market, but they need to be better. The same way you said the UFC has evolved due to pressure from Bellator and
ONE FC.
ONE FC, and that needs to happen to Flo, because the way they're going now, man, I hate it. And I just find that so much of their stuff super cringe. Like, another thing they do that annoys me is they do, you know, when you'll click on like an article or something and then it goes to Flo Grappling
And you got to pay.
and you have to pay.
Yeah,
Man, they
it's
do
paywall,
that. They do it with ones where they will take an Instagram post from, they did it when the Meow Brothers announced they were leaving Unity. They posted it on their Instagram. The Meow Brothers did. They literally, Flo Grappling, like, just copy pasted the Meow Brothers Instagram post on their website, but then you had to like pay
because they
you
have
to
like
be
a 2-paragraph like comment on it, right?
Yeah, and you have to be a Flo Grappler subscriber to read that whole article, and it's literally just the Meow Brothers Instagram post, and then like a paragraph saying, "What do you think? Where will the Meow Brothers go?" And you're like, man, it's like
clickbait,
and,
right?
And people hate that, right? People hate. It's not just Flo that do that.
It's all news
sites do it, right?
Yeah.
You go to click
it's
on
journalism 101 in today's social media market.
And I mean, it's always going to be like, oh, it's business, whatever. But like, just because I hate when people make excuses like that. Oh, but it's business, or like, oh, it's the fight game. Or like, yeah, just because it's like doesn't mean it's cool. Doesn't mean it's morally correct. You know, man, I hate it. Like, makes me like lost for words. I find super cringe.
Yeah, it's not the most clean business practices, but I mean, in terms of their journalists, they would be under the same sort of obligations as mainstream media journalism, like take 7 News or something like that. Say you're a young journalist coming up, you may be given a category like, okay, you're going to be reporting on social media. So find some, influencer story and publish it. And they would have like an obligation to produce X amount of articles per quarter or what.
But imagine like, when there's like breaking news, right? It's the news stations like rush to get there first. Like, they want to get the inside story and whatever. Imagine if you were like a news reporter and there was, I don't know, like a fire at some, apartment building. So you rush there with your camera crew to report on it, right? And then you get there and Flo Grappling like go, whoa, no, we own this. You can't report on it. Like, that would suck. I would love to see where, jiu-jitsu events and fights and everything could just be covered by whoever, and then people will watch whoever is putting out the better content.
I have to push back on. I don't know if that would work, right? So say if you had an event, where do these big jiu-jitsu events make their money from? Pretty much on the streaming and the media that comes out of these events. So if you had an event like Who's Number One, or just pick one that's not associated with Flo Grappling. So you had an event like ADCC and it was open to anyone that wanted to cover it. It would be saturated. There would be like...
No, I don't mean like that.
It would effectively be free.
No, I don't mean like that. I mean, there would have to be something like, they would know based on the venue size and everything, how many media passes they can have. Like it wouldn't just be like anyone can rock up and cover it like a fire on the street, because it's not taking place in a public place, right? Yeah. Like what I mean is anyone cover it as in if Ground 9 Productions wanted to cover ADCC, right? And if you had better camera angles and better post-fight interview and whatever, people might choose to subscribe to your coverage opposed to, or at least maybe not your coverage. Like an event like that, you may need...
You'd need professional.
You need like one sort of like overall coverage. But what I'm saying is like, imagine you wanted to cover it, you could apply for a media pass.
Yeah, you want it to be open for bidding, right?
Yeah, open for bidding. And maybe the organizers of ADCC, they know that they're going to allow, 4 different news stations to cover it or something.
So again...
Or
the pushback
maybe
on that,
maybe it only needs to be one, but like you said, it should be open for bidding. It's like the Olympics, right? Yeah. Like here in Australia, Channel 7, right, has the rights to the Olympics, isn't it? Channel 7, I believe.
I have no idea, probably.
I'm pretty sure it's Channel 7, right?
They normally take or is it? Yeah, whatever.
I'm pretty sure it's Channel 7. I haven't done my research on this, but I assume that was open for bidding. Like it's not like Channel 7 owns the Olympics. I assume it was open for bidding, and if Channel 10, Channel 9 probably could have taken the rights if they wanted to, right? But Channel 7 got it.
But the problem with that, one problem, and that's a good model, and that a lot of events have that model where it's a bidding system and then you bid for the contract. So the problem with that, if ADCC every 2 years had the media access open for bidding, it would pretty much go to the lowest bidder.
The highest bidder.
Sorry? The highest bidder. If the media company is paying the organizer, if it's the other way around, then it would be a lot. Either way, it's whoever is willing to do more work for less money is effectively it, or whoever's willing to pay more for the exclusive rights of the event. So
what's wrong with that?
So what you would eventually have is if it's reversed. For example, say ADCC is paying a media company to cover their event, then the quality and the consistency of the coverage of the event would continually be changing. Right. So with Flo Grappling, when they produce all the media coverage for ADCC, they're effectively covering everything, and that's in their contract. So ADCC is making more money because Flo Grappling is paying them more money, right? And it's better for the viewer because it's more consistent. Flo Grappling as a company can learn from their mistakes over time on what works, what doesn't work, what people want. So over time, they eventually improve. They get better and better and better until they've reached a point where they're at now, and they're hosting their own events. Who's number one? And as they learn from those events, it's just going to be better and better and better for the viewer in terms of entertainment quality and viewer value. If you're constantly changing out who's covering the event, that quality and that consistency there won't be a point of continuity to ensure growth.
Yeah, but that's on ADCC. That's on them. If they decide to go with a bidder that's willing to pay more than Flo Grappling, but dog shit, well, then that's on ADCC.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Like, I mean, is that really, yeah, okay, it won't be as good for the viewer, but like, I don't think what's best, I mean, you're kind of spinning that as if what's best for Flo Grappling is what's best for the viewer. And, you know, I don't think that's the case. Like, of course, if whichever company is covering it does better, the viewer will get a better show.
Yeah.
Right? But I mean, you know, if they keep changing who's producing it, whatever, because ADCC keeps going with different bids, blah, 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 that's on ADCC. The viewership as a whole will drop because they keep hiring dog shit companies. The integrity of the ADCC will drop. Like, that's their own problem as a business, right? It's not their problem, like, that if Flo Grappling do good or bad or whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
you sort of. I
like,
get what you're saying.
I mean, let me ask you this then. Like, you as owning Ground 9 Productions with Zach, and if you turn to me and say, the same way that some people in jiu-jitsu go, I want to be a black belt world champion, you turn to me and say, my dream is for Ground 9 to cover ADCC one day.
Yeah.
How do you get there?
Well, we'd need to effectively build our influence up to a level of competition with Flo and then outbid them.
But it's not open to public bidding.
Well, yeah, probably not. Unless we honestly, you'd probably, I don't know what their contract's like. I don't know how many years they've signed for. There would be an end to it. Surely it wouldn't be open-ended, but you would have to know someone who organizes ADCC and just give them an offer they couldn't refuse.
Oh, so you're saying you've got to be in bed with the people who are currently in bed together.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You would have to buy Flo Grappling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. They've not left it open for competition. Honestly, they're operating very similar to Amazon, right? If you wanted to compete with Amazon, how the hell could you do that? You can't. It's at this point, it doesn't seem feasible unless something crazy happened in the future. Amazon is here for a long time, and they're going to be a very dominant force. Now, I'm not saying that Flo Grappling is Amazon, but it's very similar, right, in terms of them owning the market share. So to come in over the top, it's very difficult. But in terms of media in jiu-jitsu, we've covered Flo Grappling. We understand that they cover all the events, as in the competitions, all the, featuring the athletes, the who's who in jiu-jitsu, who they determine though. We've already established there are so many good. Please, if you're a white belt like me, please just research some other athletes that aren't featured on Flo Grappling. You would be doing yourself a favor.
And don't take it the wrong way. We're not saying that the people featured on Flo Grappling aren't good.
Yeah,
they're some of the best in the world.
Yeah.
But there's just a lot of other athletes out there, right?
Exactly, yeah. Which I highly recommend. It's well worth researching and looking up. But let's shift lanes a little bit, just so people don't think that we're
cool off a little bit.
Yeah, so Adam can calm down. He's very mad. No, let's shift lanes a little bit and talk about instructionals and talk about that side of media, because the big players, if you were going to choose two big names in media in jiu-jitsu, it would be Flo Grappling and BJJ Fanatics.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with BJJ Fanatics. Maybe it's because I really like Bernardo, but
You were biased AF.
No, yeah, I've gone on saying how annoying like Flo is being biased. No, but I don't love everything about BJJ Fanatics. I think the amount of instructionals, like it's just so saturated, it's ridiculous. And I think wherever BJJ Fanatics has put the line in the sand, I think that needs to be shifted because they just put out too many instructionals. I get why, because, if some of the instructionals BJJ Fanatics doesn't even produce, right? Some of them are recorded independently and they're hosted. They're just hosted on BJJ Fanatics, right? Like they're not all recorded out of Bernardo's gym in Boston, right? Yep. Which is, if you see the ones where it's got like the BF, Bernardo Faria, on the mats in the background, that's Bernardo's gym in Boston, right? So they're not all filmed out of there. So some are filmed wherever. Like you could film one here. Lachlan Giles's one, for example, was all filmed at his gym in Melbourne. And then I believe, right, because it was with before someone listens to this and says, no, it wasn't, because I didn't actually speak to Lockie about it. But, he's filmed looks like his gym in Melbourne with one of his students, right? Yeah. It definitely wasn't filmed in Boston.
Yeah, I've produced some instructionals, not featured on BJJ Fanatics, but my company has produced jiu-jitsu instructionals.
And then it's hosted there, right?
Yes, exactly.
So you can get why BJJ Fanatics has so many instructionals, because if they're not paying anything to produce it,
and it's up to you to market it,
they're like, yeah, cool, and I just take a piece of that pie.
Yeah, they
why
take 50%.
Wouldn't they?
Yeah.
So I think the line they've put in the sand as to what they accept and what they don't it needs to be shifted closer towards the quality of instructionals. They have a lot of quality instructionals, but they also have a lot of useless instructionals, like too many, just like almost like clickbaity instructionals. But BJJ Fanatics isn't making or breaking people. Like they're semi impartial. Like if you could go to BJJ Fanatics and more or less have no name and said, oh, this is an instructional I've recorded. If the techniques are good, the quality's good and everything, like they'll host it for you. And if it sells, you can make your own name through their hosting abilities. It's not like they're a marketing mogul, like Flo Grappling, and they'll make or break you.
You market your own instructional. It depends on who we're talking about here. Like BJJ Fanatics does run ads, they do run discounts and all of that. We're excluding all their own marketing material. But for a lack of a better term, you are in charge of your own destiny here, and you market your own instructional. And if it sells, then it's based on commission.
Yeah. But, just talking about instructionals in general, I think there's too many of them. So many instructionals. I don't know how you feel as a white belt, but
I ignore most of them. Honestly, I look for instructionals on people. This is going to be, circle back to the whole Flo Grappling thing, particularly in the early days before I really knew any better. I look for instructionals that are produced by people that I know. Like I look at instructionals, if I see one that's produced by Lachlan Giles, I'd be interested in that. And I actually have bought an instructional produced by Lachlan Giles. Or if I see one produced by Craig Jones, Gordon Ryan, Danaher, those are like Flo Grappling superstars, Danaher Death Squad superstars, or our Australian hero, Lachlan Giles, along with Craig Jones. So I will look at those. Or an athlete, a friend of mine, Jeremy Skinner, his instructional.
Shout out to Lockie, actually, quickly. Lockie and his wife, Livia, just had a baby a couple of weeks ago. Little
Congrats.
Walter will be a heel hooking machine in no time.
Came out of the womb in a bloody heel hooker. So I pretty much ignore most instructionals produced by people that I don't know who they are. Because like you said, there's so many. Unless I'm specifically looking for a technique. Like I remember the first instructional I ever downloaded, it was when you put me onto stack passing. You wanted me to research stack passing and look into it because that's where we're taking my game or my development as a white belt. So I jump on BJJ Fanatics, type in stack passing. There was a few different ones, but Andre Galvao was a name that I recognized, and I knew that from the very limited research, that he was a stack passer. So that's the instructional I picked up, and it was free.
Score. Yeah, I mean, I think with instructionals, if you're at a good gym with a good coach, you shouldn't need an instructional. Like, you can always get one, but you shouldn't need it, right? Like
for belt progression and
just for progression in general.
Yep.
In your case, like, it was something you would ask.
I needed one.
Yeah, because I don't know how to stack pass. Right?
I don't know.
It was, something. Often you get students asking that they want to do more, right? They ask, what can I watch when I'm at home or when I'm not training? So in that case, it was, you would ask for more. I said, man, this is what you should do. Go look at this, right? Yeah. But if I know some people who just, they buy like almost an instructional a week.
I know those people as well.
Man, like, you can't take in all that information. When I was training in Brazil, I was on the mats twice a day, every day, with multiple black belt world champions around me. And again, this was before instructionals were what they were now. Like, you could still get stuff online and on YouTube.
But they were actual DVDs, right?
They probably were, yeah. And I remember having a friend who trained in a different country who didn't train at the gym with me. He was like, who do you study online? Do you watch any blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, it's like, bro, I learn like 20 new techniques a day. Like, I can't take in all the information I'm getting when I'm in the gym as it is. The last thing I need is more information.
What if you're at a gym that follows a very standard, structured routine that you would know 12 months in advance what they're going to teach on the second Tuesday of March, hypothetically?
I wonder who you're talking about.
I am not talking about any gym specifically.
I would suggest finding a new gym.
Okay, but say I live in Darwin and it's the only gym there.
Yeah, okay. Well, then, do some self-study. My advice with instructionals is get an instructional for something very specific, like what you did.
Like the stack passing, yep.
Yeah. Another one, we have one of my students, Ollie, the purple belt, who wanted to improve like his over-under passing and deep half guard.
You looked at Bernardo's, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you don't know, Bernardo's like the king of deep half guard and over-under. So I showed Ollie a lot of over-under, deep half guard stuff, but I'm also not a moron. Like, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I know more about that than Bernardo does. Like, the dude invented it. Like, he's the best in the world at deep half guard and over-under passes. So, I'm always there to help Ollie and teach Ollie. But I said to him, I was like, man, if you want more of this, look at Bernardo, whether it's on YouTube or his instructionals. And it's like, he bought the one instructional and like, that's what he's studying.
Yeah.
Same as like, because no instructor, doesn't matter how good they are, even if you take some of the best coaches in the world, like Fabio Gugel, like Andre Galvao, like the Mendes brothers, they're not professionals, or they're not experts in everything. Like, could Andre Galvao teach you a killer bearing bolo? Yeah, for sure. But you'd be lying to yourself if you thought his bearing bolo details were as good as Mikey Musumeshi's or the Meow Brothers or Levi's.
Base their entire game off it.
Exactly,
and
right.
And conversely, you wouldn't not trust, but you wouldn't take say Mikey's word on stack passing over right. Andre's, because his game was built on that pass.
Exactly. So if there's something very specific you want that that you're trying to replicate, then I suggest getting that specific instructional, right? But just people who just use instructionals as a way to just like have this onslaught of information, like, it's unnecessary. It's a waste of money, right? And you should be getting enough of information if you're at a good gym. If you have options, if you have gym options, like, you're not in Darwin with just one gym. If you have options in your city of different gyms to train at, and your current gym is leaving you feeling like you need a new instructional a week, man, you're at a terrible gym. Like, or you're at a gym where they don't care, or maybe it's not even a terrible gym, but just the way the coach teaches doesn't work for the way you like to learn, man, go somewhere else. But
in terms of media, Beyond Jiu-Jitsu podcast, are we pro or against BJJ Fanatics? We're definitely pro.
Yeah, I like BJJ Fanatics, right? What I don't like about instructionals and is the way people like to
invent shit, make shit up.
Invent shit.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I hate it.
Yeah.
You know, the
You're
way
going to talk about Panda Guard, aren't you?
Oh man, didn't we talk about that?
I think
podcast?
we mentioned
There was
Panda Guard
another one.
briefly.
There was another
Tarantula.
one. Tarantula
Yep,
Guard.
that
I
was your
saw
two
an
pet peeves.
instructional. It was literally collar sleeve, you know, or essentially spider guard, but his hand instead of the sleeve was on the collar or something like that. It wasn't spider guard, tarantula guard.
Yeah.
Like, dude, like get over yourself. Like, you know, people can name stuff after themselves or name new positions because it's crazy that jiu-jitsu is still evolving. Like, it actually blows my mind that we still haven't discovered everything that you can do with two like combat bodies, like locking together. There's still so many positions. Like not that long ago, K-guard didn't exist. Before that, Z-guard didn't exist. Bearing bolos didn't exist. Back in the day, half guard didn't exist. I don't know if you know this, but De La Riva guard, that's named after a guy.
Yes.
De La Riva.
Yep. I learned
you know,
that.
like, so like when it's legitimate, man, name it after yourself or name it something new. I don't care. But when it's just to try have your 15 seconds of fame, Panda, like what was the Panda guard? It was
a half guard. It was half guard.
It was
with like a specific
tarantula
grip or some
guard.
shit.
Man, it's spider guard or collar sleeve. Like, you know, it's not a new position.
Yeah.
You know,
The Panda Guard
so
sells instructionals.
Panda guards because everyone loves pandas.
Yeah.
I mean, piggybacking off Kung Fu Panda.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and people do the same sort of stuff on Instagram, right? As an instructor who has on the daily white belts or whatever belt be like, oh man, I saw this on Instagram and they show me some technique and like, you know, it's similar. Like, man, it's social media. You can't put too much into it. No one's posting on their Instagram a cross-collar choke from closed guard.
That'd be boring.
It was fucking boring. People want to see a double flip flying upside down knee bar platter.
Yeah.
You know, like, and then, oh man, look at this. Wow. Like, yeah, cool, man. It looks cool. It's on Instagram. It looks cool. Like, you know, yeah, cool. You can try it. But I mean, like, you're looking at it on an entertainment platform.
Yeah.
You know, like no one's posting hip escape.
So many instructionals.
Maybe that's an angle. I just start posting on my Instagram.
Instructionals on hip escape.
Yeah, no, but we'll call it
extreme escape.
We'll call it the prawn down here.
The prawn.
Yeah, instead of the shrimp.
Prawn maneuver.
Yeah, you know what they call, because you know how it's also called shrimp, right?
Yeah,
Hip
in
escape,
the States.
'cause you look like a shrimp. Well, I mean, yeah, I think even here it's known as that. It's really common.
Oh, I thought you were talking about a prawn versus a shrimp and how they're like the same.
Well, yeah. But I'm saying like a hip escape is called shrimping,
Yeah.
right?
No, I got it.
Yeah.
I got the joke.
Yeah. No, it's not a joke. It's what people call it, shrimping.
Yeah. And so you got to call it the prawn.
Yeah, I mean, that was a stupid joke. Yeah. But I'm saying even in Australia, people know it as
shrimping.
shrimping.
Yeah.
Yes. But
where the fuck is this going?
look, this has gone for too long that now I can't even make the joke that I wanted to make because I had to explain to you that people still call it here shrimping, even though we don't call shrimp. We call shrimp prawns.
I have derailed you. I'm sorry. I killed your bit. It's
Yeah,
like comedy rule broken. But in an unrelated news, bit off topic, we want to do a quick shout out to our sponsor. We have a new sponsor on the podcast coming soon to BJJ Fanatics, Adam Childs, super extreme guard.
Yeah, super
extreme prawn
super
guard.
extreme prawn guard. with you know, and if you click the optional DVD, you get the deep fried prawn cracker with it.
Is this the limited edition bonus?
Yeah.
Oh man,
Yeah,
that was dog shit.
And actually, when people just make up stuff, man, they change the most minute, insignificant detail on something, and
hasn't been done before. It's brand new.
yeah, like I love the evolution of the sport and legitimate brand new positions and techniques, like I mentioned, Z guard, K guard, like, you know, when bearing bolos first started happening, worm guard.
Tarika Plata, that's a cool one.
Yeah, they're like super, like, you know, legitimate different submissions. Like you look at that and you go, okay, it's it's applying the similar torque to an plata, like a very similar position, but it's
but a
not like it's
different finish.
executed completely
yeah.
different. Like
Oh,
it's
yeah.
a different technique. You can name it after yourself. You can't just do an plata and go, yeah, but like notice how I'm like doing a thumbs up while I do this plata. Yeah, so it's called the hang 10. You know, like to piss off. Like, I mean, nobody cares, bro. It's so lame.
Yeah.
I hate it, you know, but that's me and my opinion on
I think
media.
just to close out the BJJ Fanatics piece, I think that the reason that they're doing it is because these athletes, maybe they're not getting, you know, they're not getting paid either way.
Yeah, actually,
so,
that's another point. Yeah.
So like the number one way to make $1 million, if your goal was to make $1 million in jiu-jitsu, you either create a huge gym franchise and take over Gracie Barra's top spot, or you release a whole bunch of instructionals, and that's how
instructional / teach seminars.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's how Gordon Ryan and John Danaher were the first millionaires from jiu-jitsu, like being athletes, that is, not to mention people that own Flo Grappling or, you know, Bonanno owning BJJ Fanatics. They made it from their instructionals.
Yeah.
So people see that.
Yeah, I
and
mean,
they emulate.
That's it as well. Like, for all we know, we have the Panda Guard person going to BJJ Fanatics and saying like, look, I've recorded this instructional. Can you host it? And they go, no, it's Panda Guard. It's dog shit. And they give a sob story like, man, I got no money. Like, any money I make from this is going to fund my trip to the Worlds. Like, you know, like 100%. I lived that competitor lifestyle without having someone bankroll me. And it's super hard. It's super hard to afford to compete and travel. And, you know, it's really, really hard.
So if you were able to sell like, you know, make a profit of 10 sales on your instructional on BJJ Fanatics, you know, $99 each, that little bit could really help you.
Yeah. Like you know, any of these topics when we mention it on the podcast, like I always say, I'm all for the growth of the sport and seeing people be able to make money in the sport, you know, anything that allows people to follow that dream and live off jiu-jitsu, like it's all for the good of the sport.
Yeah.
You know? So, you know, when I say something like, man, fucking Panda Guard, Tarantula Guard, you know, but yeah, on the flip side, if that's helping that athlete make some money to be able to compete, like that's cool too. But, you know, where's the line, right?
Yeah, but a white belt
and I can
like
tell
me,
you it's
I
like
don't know
the
the
line
difference.
is before Panda Guard.
Yeah.
It's before Tarantula Guard, you know, like
yeah.
fuck me.
All right. Awesome. Any last words on media?
No, I think like that's taken a lot of my energy to talk
you
about.
look physically drained after 2 coffees and a self.
Despite my 2 coffees, Flo Grappling got me all worked up. and could I just before we leave, what is with the dude on Flo Grappling that thinks he's like this hella gangster, never takes his sunglasses off? Like, man, you are so lame. What's his name? I
have no idea. I'm not commenting.
Do you know who I mean?
Yeah,
though?
I do.
Oh, dude, I saw like one of it was an Instagram or YouTube video or something, and the comments were just littered with, there's one of the angles Flo Grappling are taking at the moment is this Illuminati thing. Have you seen that?
No, what?
I don't really know about it really because I don't have a lot of patience for this sort of
I thought you loved Flo.
this useless content that they put out. But it's like I don't know, it's just some crap to do with Illuminati. I don't really even know. But man, their comments were just full of like, I mean, there was 1 or 2 positive comments, but it was just hate with people saying, quit it with this Illuminati bullshit. You're supposed to be like a just cover the goddamn jiu-jitsu, and people saying, take your sunglasses off like you're not some white gangster, blah, blah, blah. Ooh. Like, or just, man,
spicy,
ripping into them. And I was like, yeah, get it, boys.
Paprika.
Yeah, but anyway, for those listening who are indoors wearing sunglasses, you look like a turd.
Yeah.
Take them off.
Or
unless they're prescription, then it's cool.
Yeah. I have no words for that. Okay.
Yeah, Kieren's sitting across from me with the biggest shades on I've ever seen.
No,
loser.
Negative. Okay, so thanks for listening to our media special episode. Episode number 11. Next episode, what are we talking about?
We're going to talk a little bit about like cross-training in terms of whether that means training other sports, whether that means, you know, doing lifting, whether that means cross-training as well can mean like training at other gyms. So just what sort of training is done, should be done, is allowed,
should be allowed.
Right?
What training we do, our own personal training routines and schedules when we're preparing for competition. Like Adam, was preparing for a super fight coming up.
Yeah, I was.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah, canned at the moment due to COVID restrictions in Sydney. We'll see if it still goes ahead.
But there will be one on the cards next year if it doesn't.
I would assume so, yeah.
Which we will go over. So stay tuned for that. Look out for episode number 11. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to leave us a review on your streaming platform of choice. Give us a follow if you're listening on Spotify.
That's just a review from Flo Grappling. You suck. You'll hear from our lawyers.
Yeah, I don't think we're even on their radar.
No.
And if you have a question you want to submit to the show, we do have a reoccurring segment called Ask a Black Belt. If you have a question you want Adam to answer, or if you have a question for me,
I was about to say we could do a Ask a Black Belt with a little in brackets or a white belt. Yeah.
Why are you so shit? That's the question.
No, but I mean it's actually not to start a whole new conversation, but I mean it's interesting. There's questions that people would want a white belt response to, I don't know, how have you found your first 6 months of jiu-jitsu, or was it what you expected? Because certain questions you could answer that I've forgotten because it was so long ago for me.
Yeah, no, I totally get you. So if you have a question for Adam, anything jiu-jitsu related, or a question for myself, anything jiu-jitsu nutrition related, submit it to the show. Just type in Beyond Jiu-Jitsu podcast on Instagram. You should be able to find us there. Or alternatively, you can go to my personal Instagram page. It's just at Kieren Lefebvre, my name, or on YouTube under the same handle. And to reach Adam,
Alliance Sydney BJJ
on Instagram. Thanks for listening, and until next time, catch ya.